and welcome to another episode of Bonnie Sessions. I took a bit of a summer break and now I am back, and we're actually wrapping up season 4 until the end of the year, which I'm really excited about. And also just to show you all of the episodes that I've kind of had on my hard disk for some time. Today's episode, I am talking to Eliza Kent. We had this conversation in summer 2023, and we discussed our poetry collections and also fiction writing in an example to the novel that she was writing at that time. I don't know, she's writing it still. And it was Hair, my published fiction novel. And actually, Eliza just recently released her debut novel, Devil and a Half, and we talk about how that kind of put us together 4 years ago. Can you believe this? We talk about like how we always connected in a way because we have parallels in our lives and careers, and how poetry is not for mass reading, mass consumerism. So many good points we had in this episode. I had a really good pleasure listening back to it, and I hope you have a good time listening to it for the first time. And yeah, make sure to check out our website. It's called bonnieslegends.com to find music reviews and other episodes that I've had with creatives around the world. And yeah, enjoy listening to this. Listeners, listen up. I have Eliza Kent with me.
Hello.
Nice. Okay, so towards the introduction, Eliza and I, we know each other since
3 years?
maybe?
4 years. Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a long time.
Yeah, we've been like writing Instagram friends.
Yeah.
And then that's what I find special about this interview is that I've written It Was Hair and you were like rewriting or like writing Devil and a Half, and we both decided we would exchange the scripts to like read over it once it's done. And I don't think we've done it really, but I remember we exchanged the scripts, but I don't know, I heard like I've read some comments on your Google Doc, but I remember reading some of it, but I was like, anyways, that was the start of our friendship. That's how I remember it.
Yeah, no, it's so weird. It's like a little scrapbook, like looking back. Because I remember we were on like the same live stream or something. And I don't know what happened. I guess we just followed each other, and then we must have DM'd each other at some point and just started talking about writing, and then beta reading. And we were both like, oh yeah, we're writing books right now. And we're both like the same age. And that's like really weird considering we were like, I don't know, we would have been like 15 or 16 at the time. So it was like a rare opportunity, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it is special, right?
Yeah.
To find someone who also writes at your age.
Yeah,
Is
for
Devil and a
sure.
Half, was it your first novel you've
It
written?
was, I consider it's like my first novel, but it's technically my third novel. So I wrote I self-published a book when I was like 14 or 15. And I still kind of like that book, but I like unself-published it. Like I took it down because I like the story and I'm proud of it, but I'm like, I don't want this thing that I wrote when I was 14 to represent me as an author. So this is like my first like new release that I would consider like this is my like actual debut, I guess.
Nice. I love that. Yeah. I mean, Follow Me, my debut novel, which is very much alive on all publishing platforms. I've written that when I was 13, 14 too, and I published it when I was 15. And I consider it sometimes I'm publishing too, but like I don't know, I kind of like seeing the growth in it, and I like, as you said, I like the story, so I'm like, maybe people like maybe readers will like the story too, so I try to not think much about it.
Yeah, I remember you talking about your first novel, and like I don't know, like both of us having that thing that we wrote when we were like so young. It's so
Yes.
like embarrassing as a writer to look back. Like I have it over here on my shelf because I still have like a few copies of it. But it's like so embarrassing looking back at like a book that you wrote when you were like 13 or 14. But at the same
Mm,
time, like you wrote a book when you were 13 or 14. Like most people don't do that. So even if it's
yeah.
not like up to par with the publishing industry, like it's
Yeah.
still really cool that you have that when you're like an adult to look back on.
Yeah. Like some people don't even write books until like absolute at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And we've written like books at
Exactly.
13. That's
Yeah.
that's pretty sick.
It's very cool, yeah.
Yeah. But, like we have so many connections.
Yeah. Like
I
there's
like
so many
that.
parallels.
Yeah. So, um yeah. So I remember we swept then the scripts and kind of beta read it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Whatever that
then
happened, I don't remember what
yeah.
happened. I remember I read like at least like 30 pages of your book or
Oh
something.
really? Okay.
Yeah, it was something like that because I remember I had like a huge chunk of it, but I don't know, it was so long ago that it's like I don't
Yeah.
even remember writing Devil and a Half. I don't know if you have that
Wow.
experience too where once you move on to like your new big project, it's kind of like a reset in your brain and you just kind of forget about the last one.
I do that with publishing. I like to blend out how the publishing process was because self-publishing is sometimes very dreadful.
Yeah.
So I have that with the publishing. I don't have it with the writing. Like I have very good, like very clear memories of like
Yeah.
how I wrote It Was Here and how I wrote Follow Me even like we're talking about.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, it's like something I always look back on.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not like all the moments I sat down and write it, but like I remember specific, like where I've written specific scenes. I remember that.
Yeah.
So
I
I don't
do
know.
have like a few of those experiences, more so with my poetry, but I think that makes sense because
Mm,
poetry is more like about my life, whereas fiction is like
yeah,
this other story that I'm just making up completely.
yeah. We're going to talk about that in this
Yeah.
episode.
Yes, we are.
um, um, yeah, I love that. Um, anyway, I remember the most where we started exchanging poetry is like where our friendship like really started off, where we
Yeah.
like exchanged numbers and then sent um over iMessage.
Yeah.
We sent each other poems, and I do remember that very clear because I did share the view. I'd never shared poetry at all.
Hmm.
Like I talked to some people about it. I was like, yeah, I also write poetry, but like it was a secret, and I did not. As you said, it's like very personal. It's like about my life, very very the contrasting to like fictional novels, and so I remember I was like very excited when you were like sending me your poem, and then I was like, oh, now I need to send her a poem too, and so I
Yeah.
my archive and was like, oh, what am I sending here? And so I sent you the very recent one I wrote back then, and that was Tennessee, Your Treehouse, A Dog and Your Mom.
Yeah.
I remember it very clearly which one it was, and
Yeah.
it's funny because that one, right, is the I think yeah, it's the first poem in my poetry collection now. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. No, and it's also like once we did start reading each other's poetry, not only was it like personal, but like we realized kind of the parallels in our poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think
Yes.
stylistically we have like super similar styles, but I feel like the
No.
themes like
Themes, yeah.
and I think we're going to get into this too, but like I don't know, just like the contents of the writing is like I would read your poem and be like, this is like something I would think about, or like this is a feeling I've felt or like would feel if I was in
Yeah.
like the same situation.
Yeah, same. I thought that with your poetry too. And it's like, as you said, I love like how different our poetry styles is. But
Yeah.
like, when I read like your poetry, it's like really interesting because I noticed that when I'm writing completely different poetry than what I like to read, like I like to read poetry which is very mysterious and
Oh,
has like a
really?
lot of nature, yeah, like
Yeah.
nature metaphors into it. And I'm writing very like direct, honest,
Yeah.
almost dialogue kind of,
Mhm.
or like monologue kind of poetry. And so I like your poetry that because of that, because I like to read mysterious,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have like a favorite poet or?
Well, I love Dakota Warren.
Mm-hmm.
She got published. That's actually funny. I kind of followed her. She was a huge book YouTuber. I mean, she still is, but I found her through YouTube, and then she kind of said she's also like writing poetry. And then a friend of mine had launched her publishing company and had actually published her poetry collection,
Oh,
and I've met
cool.
her and everything. So it was like, wow.
Yeah, I think I remember you telling me about that. Like, oh, I
Yeah,
met this poet and it was so awesome. And I was like, that's so cool.
probably it was a good day
Yeah.
to remember it. No, but like I love her poetry collection. Do you have a favorite poet?
I am so, so picky about reading poetry to the point where I
Yeah,
like
same.
almost don't read poetry ever because like it quite frankly reading a lot of poetry like annoys me because I feel like poetry is either like a lot of the times what's published today is either like Ruby Carr, like Eliza Gray's
Mm.
poetry that's just like so like in my opinion trash poetry
Mm.
because it's so like Instagram poetry or like
Oh
there's
yeah, yeah,
no
yeah.
creativity behind it. And on the other side of that, there's like really pretentious poetry that's just like
Yes.
trying to be super deep, but there's just not a lot there, or it's like
Yeah.
not really anything you can unpack. So I'm like really picky. I'm blanking on the name of the author, but I did have to read a book for one of my workshops, and it was called
Mm.
Ghost of. And I
Okay.
really liked that poetry collection because it opened up like the world of visual poetry for me, which I never
Nice.
like wrote in before, but
Yeah.
the author did this like really cool thing where she would like stamp the poem over and over again and make it into like the
Ooh.
shape of people, and I thought that was so cool. So that
Wow.
I haven't read a lot of poetry, but that's definitely my favorite poetry collection.
Nice. I'm going to look into it. Going to look
Yeah,
into it. Yeah. And
you
I just
definitely should.
remembered I just purchased, like, I got a secondhand copy of Selected Poems by Sylvia Plath because
Yeah.
I'm reading right now the Belger, and I was like, she wrote mostly poetry and essays, so I was like, I need to read her poetry. And like you see it, are you like a lot on TikTok or anything?
Not a lot on TikTok, more so on Instagram.
Okay. And okay, so there's this thing going on TikTok that there are these poetry slideshows,
Mhm.
like the really deep, like hard hitting snippets of poems. Even it's
Yeah.
not even an entire poem, and like usually you get that by 2 a.m., right, when you're like in your
Yeah.
feelings and you cannot sleep.
Yeah, when you're in your
But
weakest
that's
spot.
yeah, and so it's like interesting because that is usually like unnamed poets. Like it's usually something they
Yeah.
find on the internet, but they make it poetry in a way. They like they've including it. They've like poets of like Sylvia Plath, and
Yeah.
so that's how I found out even about like I found like the fig tree
Yeah.
story of Sylvia Plath, and so I was like, I need to read the book. And then that's like her only fictional novel, so I was like, oh, she's actually a poet. So I have
Yeah.
to read that. I haven't read it yet, but very excited.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, but no, I get like poetry is not a mass consuming
No,
product.
not at all.
It cannot be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that these days people try to make it more mass consuming with like social media, but I
Mm-hmm.
feel like in my opinion it like ruins it to some extent because so much of like my struggle in trying to put my poetry out there is like so much of what Instagram poetry wants and TikTok wants is like really small bits
Yeah.
that don't need any context to them. And in order for that to make sense, it has to be like a simple concept, and I think that that like strips a poem from like being able to handle like bigger emotions and like longer,
Yes.
more complex storylines, especially because I feel like I write really long poems. So the idea of
Same.
like trying to have like 30 words for like an Instagram reel like stresses me out so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually try. I then split up my poem, or like
Yeah.
just post a snippet of it. But it's ruining it, right? It's in a bit of.
Yeah.
It's like if you would know the line before that and the line afterwards, you would be blown away.
Yeah, it's almost like the fast fashion of writing is like Instagram
Mm.
poetry.
I love that quote. That's going to be the title of the episode.
Oh, that's awesome. I
I
mean,
love
to me
that.
it makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Like
Yeah.
short form content these days is like, and I sound like such an old person saying this, but like it's ruining like classic literature.
No, 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 no. I get that. I feel that very much too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about like Instagram poetry? I remember like I have two half sisters, and I remember being very young, like I don't know, I mean very young, no, like 12, 11.
Yeah.
It's not very young, I guess. Yeah. And I remember like my one of them was like obsessed with this poet on Instagram, and he had a bestseller, but like basically his poems were just I am enough. And then the next page, it
Yeah.
was like, yeah, it was more, like nowadays, I would say that's a poetry that's like affirmations. But it's like
Yeah.
interesting how people sell you sometimes affirmations as poetry, but just like, this is, yeah, like I
Yeah,
am
no.
enough. Yeah. I mean, I'm Ken enough is maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Maybe
the
that was,
only Instagram poetry that I want.
yeah, exactly.
But I know exactly what you mean. They are really more like affirmations or just like I said, they're so simplified that there's no metaphor. Or like I remember there's this one, I want to say that it's a Ruby Kaur poem, though I could be wrong, where she makes an observation where she's like, my mom used to touch the flattening iron to like check to see if it was hot. And there's a metaphor in there. And it's like, okay, then write the metaphor. Like, don't tell
Yeah.
the audience that there's a metaphor. Like, your job as the poet is to find the metaphor. So don't
Yeah.
be like, oh yeah, here's this thing I observed. Like, I feel like there's potential in this. Like, that's for the drafts. That's not for the published book.
Yeah. Yeah. True. True. Yeah, if like that, yeah, as you said, like an observation, like I take note of that, what I've just watched or like observed,
Yeah.
and then maybe it comes up in a poem again, right? Like
Yeah,
I've had
as like
to,
a prompt, but not
yeah,
as like
yeah,
the entire poem. Like it needs to go further, like it needs development, it needs revision.
yes, yes, true. No, but I love metaphors, and I use them too. As I said, I have like direct and honest poetry, like almost like monologue, but there are a lot of metaphors into them if you
Yeah.
like actually go into it. And so I love how, yeah, I love when something can be like thousands of different things.
Yeah,
And I
for
think
sure.
that's the beautiful thing of poetry, that it can be. And I mean, everyone will look at poetry, I mean, everybody looks at art always with their own perspective and like life experiences or like what
Mm.
they're just going through. But like poetry is like where it's like where it needs to be the most present there, like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you cannot just, I mean, a novel you can always like continue to read, but like poetry you just need to be there. That's why it's
Yeah.
not a mass consuming product. You have to be in the mood.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it
It
took
has
me
to be
years
like it's
it
like
takes me
for
years to
yourself. It's
poetry.
not for everyone. And I
Yes.
feel like it can't be something that everybody likes. And I feel like that's kind of the great thing about it is like you need to have like a poet that you like or like poetry that you
Mm.
like. But if your poetry is appealing to everyone, then I feel like there's something wrong with it to some
Yeah.
extent.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get that. I have that with, I mean, you probably have that with your poetry collection too. Um, but it's like, oh god, I'm putting out this poetry collection, and it is kind of personal, and I'm like wondering like if people will like it, and then it's like, like if not everyone, like not, I don't want everyone to like it. Like I don't want
Yeah.
everyone to like read my poems about cowboys and be like, hell yeah, I
Yeah.
don't want that. um,
Yeah, and it's interesting to see like and I feel this with like my fictional work as well, like seeing who dislikes it And sometimes if I feel like the right people dislike it, then I know I'm doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah. I had that. Have I told you that? I think I've told it some people. But like with my debut novel, where I had the villain's name. I mean, he's not really. I mean, he is the villain of the story. And I gave him the name of a relative that my family has not been in touch for a long time. And I did not see that connection at all. But they came in touch with us because the villain had the name of, and I was like, and
Oh,
it brought up like
interesting.
entire, yeah, and it brought up like family drama, and I was like, God, I did not, I just called him that way. Like, why did,
Yeah.
but I was like saying there, I was like, oh, so the villain was well written then, because
Yeah.
otherwise the connection would not have been made. So I was like, I did something right, although I,
Yeah.
brought up entire family structures there, but
Yeah. Yeah, the conflict is like almost more revealing than like who likes your poetry. In fiction too,
mm,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah, true. Okay, well, that was it. I loved the intro of talking about
Yeah.
poetry. um, yeah. So no, I think I would like to introduce yourself a bit. What are you
Yeah.
writing? What you've written? What you've
Yeah.
published?
So right now, I always struggle with introductions because I'm like, I don't know what's important,
Yes.
what's not. But right now, I'm going to school for creative writing. I'm a junior at Arizona State University for, like I said, creative writing with an emphasis in fiction, although do write a lot of poetry too. I've self-published my first poetry collection about a year ago. I just recently had like the 1 year birthday of my poetry book, which was so weird because it doesn't feel that long ago. And
Yeah.
then I also recently signed my novel Devil and a Half, which is a thriller, to be published with Gen Z Publishing, and I'm in the process right now. I just actually the other day got my manuscript back from like an editor, which sounds so
Ooh.
fancy, and I feel so fancy saying that. But yeah, I'm just now looking over like what he's changed and like making more revisions and stuff. And I've been working with like a book cover artist and like all this weird stuff that's like so foreign to me, but also so fun.
Nice. I love that. Congratulations. That
Thank
is really
you.
huge. I
Yeah.
remember you like writing me like, have I told you already? And I was like, no. But that is huge.
Yeah,
um,
when there's such big news, like you forget who you've told because it's like
mm,
I had to go around and tell like all my friends and family and then like message like my online friends who like I've been writing with, like my writing friends at school, and I was like, "Wait, did I not tell Bonnie? Like how did not tell you?" But I did tell you. I think I told you
yes.
like the day after or something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay. So it was not that late, but I was
Yeah.
like, no.
Yeah.
You have not told me. Good to know. It was just the day after. So
Yeah.
I did not care really, but I was just like, oh my god, like when like someone writes you that, it's just really
Mhm.
huge because it is
Yeah.
a big goal in a writer's life.
Yeah, and it's so
Um,
overwhelming, like, when it happens, and that's
mm,
why I probably forgot to tell you for, like, a day or 2, because
yes,
I was just,
yeah,
like I was almost and I guess this is, like, an imposter syndrome thing, which I feel like a lot of writers struggle with, is I was looking for evidence that it wasn't real in a way, as I
oh
was,
yeah,
like, because I met with my professor afterwards, and I was like, "Is this a scam? Like, are they scamming me?" And I was, like, showing
hmm
him my contract, and, like, he was helping me, like, negotiate my contract and everything, and I was, like, looking for evidence that it was a scam, but he was like, "No, like, this is a real publishing place, like, they're not like, as long as you kinda talk to them about this stuff, like, it's fine."
yeah, love that. Love your professor. Good on him.
Yeah.
Good on
Amazing
him.
professor.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I remember when I got a contract for Follow Me, but it was
Mm.
not just a contract for Follow Me, it was like a contract of 3 years
Oh,
as me as an
interesting.
author. Yeah. And it was a scam at the end. I mean
Yeah.
it was a real publishing company, but they would have screwed me over by my because I was so young.
Yeah.
I did not take it. But I remember that feeling of like getting the post and opening up the mail and be like, oh, this is a contract.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that feeling.
Yeah.
So congratulations, that's
Thank
huge.
you.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. And what about you? Do you want to talk about
Oh
your
yeah.
what's going on with your busy writing career? I mean, I already know, but for those listening, you have a lot going on right now, so
Oh, I do. It's actually true. So I announced the pre-order of It Was Here, my second fiction novel, in February. I originally wanted to publish it last November, and then just time-wise, I did not make it.
yeah.
And so February was pre-order campaign, and I did not had set any release date, which was definitely an experience
Mhm.
because usually you have like a release date, and then people expect your book to arrive around that. But I think just because I did not really know how to financially also like publish this book and like print
Yeah.
it. So I had to go through like some options and had to wait for like an amount of pre-orders to actually get it printed. And I mean, it is here now. There we
It's
go.
so pretty. I was going to ask you about the cover. I remember you talking to me a little bit about like hiring an artist for the cover for I think you
Yes.
said the first time for your work?
Yeah, I did. I usually do my cover on my own, and I do it with my poetry collection now on my own too. Um, but yeah, no, I commissioned an artist on it. I was like asking my Instagram story, and then asked Kyla Rain, which I mentioned, did not name drop, but I mentioned her before.
Mhm.
She's the friend who has a publishing company, and so she reshared it with her community. And then I found Sylvie Ruscombe the King, a Scottish, a British artist, and yeah, and I sent her like I found like two pictures, and basically it's like, and I put them together as a collage, and then
Yeah.
I sent it to her and was like, I want this as a cover. And
Mhm.
she like asked me about like the size of it, and like the canvas is like, so her canvas was like the size about the dust cover, like the
Yeah.
dust jacket, right? It's a
Yeah.
hardcover, so it has a dust jacket. And no, she painted it really beautifully, and I remember uh November 2 years ago, I like got it sent into my email. Like she sent a picture of it and was like, it's done and ready," and I was like tearing up in the coffee shop. I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh my god, this is so beautiful!"
Yeah.
Because the collage already like looked beautiful, and I kind of saw how I wanted it to look like,
Mhm.
but seeing it painted was like even more like paint, like something about painting,
Yeah.
just making it emotional and like even more deep in a way. And so I was like
Yeah.
tearing up in the coffee shop, and everyone was like, "Oh, are you fine?" I was just, "Do you see this? This is
Yeah.
beautiful."
No, it really is a beautiful cover, and I love that it like wraps around the whole like I
Yeah,
guess jacket. It's really
yeah.
pretty.
I guess for the listener, maybe a bit to describe it. So basically, in the front cover, you see basically the entire picture frames like the ocean and a sunset.
Yeah.
Sunset, yeah. And in the front cover, you see basically a figure of a woman. I mean, obviously, because the book is called It Was Here.
Yeah.
And then on the back, you see a little dog, also the
Yeah.
shadow of a dog. Which is the side character who steals the show sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So basically, yeah. But I guess the listener just has to see it in a way. But like,
Yeah, like listeners just look it up because it's very beautiful. And I love the colors as well. It's very
yeah, that
pretty.
was
And I think it
actually not.
matches the vibe of the story as well.
Oh yeah, it's a bit of a blue story. That's true.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
a yeah. No, I was actually thinking of sharing like that cover is actually we're diving into the cover, but anyway, we're like deep diving into the cover. But like the cover represents a scene in the novel, which is like I have two key scenes in this novel, and like that's the second one
Yeah.
where no, not yet, but like wait, let me. It's a bit of a spoiler scene, so that's why I never
Yeah.
really shared like behind the cover
Mhm.
idea. But I was thinking I should maybe just like talk about it on
Mhm.
social media and like tell people, because if they buy the book, they eventually maybe have forgotten about it really, or um no, but it's like, yeah, people a lot of think like, even if the title It Was Here, right, people think it's the main character Annabelle Gordon, like her is the Annabelle Gordon, and in that scene, and so they think also on the cover it's hair because that's her dog on the backside. But spoiler alert, it's actually not hair. It's someone
Yeah.
else. And
Interesting.
actually, maybe I'm just going to say that because I have something to say to you about that.
Yeah.
I think I told you vaguely, but like
Yeah.
actually it's about her sister, Annabelle's sister, who is dead in the book. And the sister kind of represents me. If you actually like read it, it's like, oh my god, that's so funny.
Yeah.
But um no, I called the sister Eliza. I called
Yeah.
her Eliza
I
because we
remember when you told me that and I was so excited. And I remember I told like several of my friends that day. I was like, "Guess what? There's like a book character named after me." And they're like, "Oh, there's a character named Eliza." And I was like, "Yes, but like after me. Like this is like my
yes,
friend
after
named this
you.
Eliza because she knows me." And I was like, that has to be like the biggest flex. Like I think ever is to be like, "Yeah, my friend wrote a book and like named a character my name."
Yeah. Yeah, I was like looking for a name and I was like, because I remember like the sister is kind of a plot twist in a novel. That's why I was
Yeah.
like, this is spoiler alert. But so when it was also like a plot twist for me because I'm not plotting, like I'm just coming up with it
Yeah.
as I go. And so I was like, I need a name, I need a name. And because we've been like in touch there about like
Yeah.
exchanging the script, I was like, guess what? I called her Eliza.
Yeah. Like why not?
Yeah, and it's a good name actually. I love the name now. It's
Thank you.
like it has like a special place now. The character and your name.
Yeah, it's so cool. It really is like the biggest brag that I have
Yeah.
is like there's like a character named Eliza in this book
Yeah,
and
and
because my
it's
friend
even
knew
on the
me.
cover, right? It's
Yeah.
even on the cover. Like it's not Annabelle on the cover, it's
Yeah.
like Eliza. So
Yeah.
it's you on the cover. The truth's coming out. It's actually Eliza on the cover.
That's so
um
cool.
yeah. No. Thank you for asking about the cover. I know I should
Yeah. I mean,
like
I think covers are important. I haven't gotten my cover back from my cover artist yet. I don't know when I will, but I remember they emailed me and kind of like through email introduced me to the graphic designer and was like, okay, she's gonna be like designing your cover, like let her know what you want. And I feel like she was expecting me to be like, oh yeah, maybe something like this. I sent like a huge collage. I was like, I want it to look
yeah.
like this with like these colors and this font, and I don't want this like font. I don't want it to look like this. I don't want
Nice.
this like brushstroke. I was like so particular. And
I love that.
like my biggest fear is that like I'm going to get the cover back and I'm not going to like it because I
Mm,
think that like they always say don't judge a book by its cover, but like I think when I'm at a bookstore and there's like hundreds of books, like I'm going to look for the cover that stands
yes.
out to me.
You absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You're not buying, yeah, you have to go for, like, you're going by a shelf. And if the cover doesn't
Yeah.
grip you, you don't stop and read the back side of it and, like, read
Yeah.
what it's about. Yeah, no, same. Um, no, but I hope it's going to look good.
Yeah, I hope
I
so
mean,
too. I'm so excited. I'm just glad it's out of my hands because I've never been a great artist. So,
don't say that. I actually love the cover of your poetry collection.
thank you. Yeah, that was something where I was like, it actually wasn't the first cover that I had. I had an entirely other cover picked out, and it
Really?
had like flowers and like different font and like I don't know, the vibes were just a lot different. And then I was kind of unsure about it because I thought it was a little busy looking and it was kind of hard to read like
Hmm.
the title. And then
Oh,
I was
yeah.
trying to take these photos for like promo for my book, like just to post and be like, yeah, this is the title. And then I was like, wait, I actually kind of like this cover better. So I was like, why not? Like, I'll just do this because I like it because it's like my head, but you can't like
Yeah.
see my face. And it's like the rose. And then my mom pointed out at some point that I have like all the pictures or the poetry on the wall, and then I'm holding
Yes.
like a rose that's like breaking. And my mom
Yeah.
pointed out that it looks like I'm holding a pen that's like a flower, and it's like I'm
Absolutely.
writing the words on the walls. And I didn't think
Okay.
about that when I was doing it, but I really liked that observation.
I mean, I guess it's the pen grip, right? We writers
Yeah,
have the pen grip, and so I
yeah,
mean that happens. Like I'm eating my fork. I held my
yeah,
fork like a pen.
yeah,
So of course you grip the rose like that. I would probably do the same. But no, I love that. And I mean, it makes kind of sense like that. I see that image of you writing the poems with a breaking rose. I love it.
Yeah.
It gives off the vibe of the poetry, definitely.
Yeah, we have an outline created by, or partially created
AI.
by Chat GTP, right?
Yes.
Which is actually a really good outline, which is impressive and also terrifying that like a computer can just like do this for us in 2 seconds.
I mean, it's just like I mean, the structure was kind of in a way of like, I have all these ideas, but I have no idea how to write them all down. So I'm just typing it all into ChatGPT, and it says something very nicely and structured. Okay, so like the second point would be here writing processes and inspiration. Like the difference between writing a novel and poetry. Do you want to dive into that?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. It's so hard, like, whenever people ask me about, like, my process for writing, because I feel like every piece is different. Like, every poem is different, and every novel and every draft is different. But I think it all comes down that, like, poetry is more so inspired by, like, my life and, like, my emotions and what's going on. And I think you and I have talked about this, like, just writing down notes in our drafts or, like, in the notes app specifically, and then, like, coming back and, like, having that bit of emotion there when you're in the moment, and then coming back when you're more clear-headed and you're in like your more technical poetry or writing brain, and like fleshing it out and revising it and like trying to make it readable. That's usually my process for like writing poetry versus novels. I feel like, I don't know if you relate to this, but it's like different every time I write a book. And I've noticed that now that I've written like a number of books and different projects, is when I was writing Devil and a Half, it was like write one draft and it's like a horrible first draft, right? And then I spend most of the writing process rewriting it and revising it and stuff like that. Whereas the novel that I'm currently working on is like, I think I wrote 2 full drafts, and instead of revising them, I just completely discarded them. And I was like, I hate this so much. So I have like 500 or 600 pages of like the same book over and over again that I just hate. And then I kept writing it until I had a first draft that I like. And now I'm like 100 pages into the first draft. And I'm like, I needed this first draft to have like confidence in itself before I could revise it.
Yes. I experienced it with the novel I'm currently writing too. It is the story. It's kind of fictionalized story version of the poetry theme of the collection. So that's why I kind of want to put it all together. I mean, obviously, first now the poetry collection, and then like maybe next year the book. But I had experience, like I've written on that book now for the same time as the poetry collection, and it's like funny to think that I never really considered putting out the poetry, especially about that specific guy. I just saw myself like publishing that fictional novel and be like, hey, like this is my novel. And now I'm actually like the poetry collection is like finished and the novel is not yet. So I've been writing on it for like 2 years, and it's been like really frustrating because, as you said, I've been like rewriting the same scene over and over again. And
it gets so exhausting.
Yes, because it's like you have this idea, but for me it was how. So basically, in what the poetry collection is also about, it's about 2 lovers who meet in their dreams, and so they have no idea who they are, like who is this in their dream, and then they kind of really coincidentally, or like maybe destined, find out who it is, and they like, gosh, I dream of them. Is this we like what is this? And which is then interesting that they try to communicate then in real life. Like they try to find out if they really like if the other dreams of them too. And so that is the most difficult part about writing that novel, because it's like I have so many different versions of like how those two people meet.
Yeah.
In real life, because I have like I know how they met in the first time in the dreams, but I have so many ideas of how they could meet in real
Yeah.
life. And then what I found personally the most interesting experiences, obviously the poetry collection is, as we said, poetry is usually drawn from like real experiences. So that story is like inspired by maybe a true story too,
Yeah.
right? So for me, the funniest thing was when there was this guy and I was like dreaming of them, and so I did write those all this poetry because I was like, this is weird. Why am I dreaming of them? I'm not even interested in them. And then,
Yeah.
started slowly developing feelings, which was dangerous and like broke my
Mm-hmm.
heart. But it was like really interesting because when I met them, some time ago, I don't say really when, but it was really of like, it was interesting because afterwards, like re-going, and even now, like re-going of how we met for the first time in real life, right? It's like really interesting of how it kind of had like so many like little details of like all of the scenes I've written about these two people to come together for the first time in real life. And I was like, fine, okay, so now I stretched out everything that actually really
Yeah.
happened. And that actually helped me narrowing down now like how
Yeah.
those fictional characters meet, because it's like this absolutely should not draw to any real life experiences. And so yeah, maybe that was helpful, but like maybe.
No, yeah, that makes sense though, because when you talk about it like that, the more I see, like, especially in my newer fiction, like connections to my life, though they aren't like explicit. Like, I don't have a character that's like this person in my life, or like, oh, I'm this character and this other person is this like, it's not that explicit, but
Yes.
there definitely are things where I'm like, I feel like more so I have like these strong feelings, and when I
Mm,
can't put it enough of it into a poem, I'll personify like the feeling into a character. So I have
nice.
like these archetypal character, I don't know if that's a word, archetypal, but like I have these characters who like, I remember one of my professors said that every character has an obsession. And so I think that as humans, like we have like these different interests and like obsessions, in a more like intense way of putting that. And so like to have one that like you can't get rid of, you kind of put it into a character. And then so
Nice.
it's like a part of you, but it's the entire character. So it's like you're kind of getting it out of yourself,
Mm,
or a feeling you have towards another person, or like
yes.
something you
Yes.
deal with another person, or I don't
Yeah.
I don't know if that
But
makes sense, but like kind of
no, it makes
drawing
sense.
not from experience but from like emotion, and then putting
Yes.
that into another character, and then putting that character into a different situation.
Yes. No, that's totally what happened if it was here for me, where I was thinking this is completely fictional, and then it turns out like
Yeah.
the main characters are kind of have like characteristics of like my dad, and then my
Yeah.
celebrity crush, and then the woman Annabelle Gordon, where we said we kind of would dive into, but like represents kind of a friend I had in back then.
Yeah.
And so definitely, and I mean, obviously that character
Yeah.
cannot is not the person we have in our real life. Like I have no idea how that guy feels, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
just writing from like purely the feeling I have like
Yeah.
towards him, and give it to him anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like we can learn so much from ourselves, or like I learned so much from like reading back stuff that I wrote, like poetry but also fiction, is because I was always like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm just making this up, because I base a lot of my story ideas off of like nightmares or dreams that I have. But
Yeah,
when you
same.
get into like the deep parts of like writing a character, and you're like reading that back, especially now because I've written so many drafts, and like looking at the draft that I have now, which feels more genuine, is
Yeah.
I'm realizing that it feels genuine because it's like a projection of like myself or my insecurities, or like these feelings or these situations. And it's like, oh, that's why I'm so like have this weird love hate relationship with this story, because on one hand it's helping me express these things and like get them out of myself, but at the same time it's like a lot of the times they're negative emotions. They're like
Yes.
not they're not good things. It's not like, oh, I'm such a happy person, so I'm gonna write a happy character. It's like betrayal or like insecurity and
Yes.
like
Yes.
all this stuff, and it's like you can learn so much of like your feelings
Yes.
based on like which feelings feel genuine to write in another character.
Yeah. That just made me think, do you even think there is something like as like happy characters?
I don't know. I don't think I've ever personally written a happy character.
Yes.
I
I
feel
was
like
the same.
I'm a little biased though because I feel like well you write like kind of sad stories and I write scary stories. So I feel like I think for me at least when my character is happy at the end of the story, right before the story ends, I'm going to take that away because you can't in my mind you can't have a horror novel that ends like
Mm,
happily because
yeah,
it's not a
absolutely.
horror novel that way. And it's
Yes.
like a false ending kind of thing where it's like you can have a character survive, but then at like what cost are they living in?
Yes.
Like what world are they
Yes.
living in after the story? Because if they're living the exact same life they were living before, what was the point of like the story taking place to begin with?
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I mean, and it's interesting because like it was usually my books have always open endings. I mean,
Yeah,
Follow Me has an open ending, and now this one I'm writing currently has also an open ending. I mean, the poetry collection has an open ending, which is the
yeah,
most funniest thing because it has like a storyline, and then I just let the reader like decide on their own what happened. So it was like really surprising for me to write It Was Here because It Was Here starts off as being a really sad story. Like the character is very miserable and like hopeless in some way, and so it's like it really surprised me when it has an open ending. You know, it actually
yeah,
has an ending and it is actually happy. So I was like
yeah,
really surprised by that fact. Um, and it makes me kind of that makes me kind of happy, you know, because
yeah.
I tend to, as you said, I tend to write usually really sad
Mm-hmm.
stories. And I mean, It Was Here is in a way I've been writing about this because it's like a love novel, but for me personally it kind of represents a grief novel because both
Yeah,
characters kind of come from a point where, you know, like Harrison Selig is divorced and still grieves like that his ex-wife has filed for divorce, and Annabelle's coming from a point where she has lost her sister, and
yeah,
so it's like really I'm like really happy that I gave them a happy ending.
yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think framing it as like grief instead of like sad is a lot
Yes.
better too. Because I write about that
Mm,
a lot in my stories, is I try to make them scary and stuff. But I think at
yes.
the root, a lot of my characters are depressed or anxious or
Mm,
grieving and stuff like that. Like in the novel that I'm working on right now, my main character had lost his girlfriend and believes that
okay.
she's dead at the beginning of the story. And
Oh,
then my other
interesting.
main character is losing her eyesight. So she's grieving like that, losing that part of her. And so I think when you put characters in situations of like intense grief, you kind of
Yes.
get to see what happens and they kind of
Yes.
get away from you, and I think it makes the most interesting stories, honestly.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I was just thinking the same. I think I could not. That's why I asked because I don't think I would be able to write happy characters like a
Yeah,
story where everything is good and then maybe some
yeah,
conflict happens and then it's all good again at the end. Like I don't think I'm
yeah.
that kind of
I
writer.
think, I mean, all stories definitely need a conflict. I would say that the closest to like happy would be like Hallmark type Christmas movies and like romance novels, or like yeah,
Yes.
where like the biggest conflict is that like their wedding planner canceled on them or
Yes.
something really minuscule and completely fixable.
Yeah. That's why I don't tend to call It Was Here a romance novel. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it has a love story, but like
Yeah.
the conflict is like, it, as I said, it's grief and like
Yeah.
dealing with it and
Well,
moving
because
on.
I think for your novel, it's experiencing like the internal feelings rather than like the conflict is
Mm,
internal rather than like oh, their
external.
families don't want them to be together, but then once they allow them to, everything's fine. No, it's more like these characters are like kind of broken inside, and like
Yeah.
that's kind of that's not an easy fix, right? And I think that
Yeah.
makes really interesting characters.
Yes, same. That's maybe why we cannot write happy
Yeah.
stories. All our characters are broken.
Yeah. At least a
um,
little bit, if not completely.
yes, I was thinking I'm applying for a writing course, like a scholarship, and I'm sending in a novel idea, like a novel I've started writing 2 to 3 years ago. I don't remember it anymore. But it's called Honestly I Could Cry. Don't anyone not stealing this, please.
I love that title. Like right off the bat, I love that title so much.
Yeah, and it's like even when I'm rereading it, like I haven't written something onto it like years, and I mean that's why I kind of want to go into this writing course, because it's like I really want to finish it because it's good. I love it. Because every time I read this, I cry because it's like really
Yeah.
like the characters are so complex and sad and broken that I'm just always crying whenever
Yeah.
reading it. And I mean that's why I called it probably also back then. Honestly, I could cry. But I was thinking of like when I'm sending it away, I was like, the poor editor. Like I don't want, but like I want the scholarship, but I don't want them seeing sobbing in their office. Of like,
Yeah.
God, I knew the title was Honestly I Could Cry, but I did not expect to cry.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
love that
yeah.
title so much. I love titles that are like self-aware like that.
Yes, yeah. Um, so that story is like very sad, and that's why
Yeah.
I need a course to mentally like
Yeah.
support me by writing this novel.
No, that makes
um,
sense because it does get draining on like yourself too to have because
yes,
like the novel I'm working on right now, I've been working on it for like 2 years and only have like maybe 100 pages that I'm like, okay, this is like good so far.
yeah,
But it's I've taken so many breaks from it just because there's so much of it that's like heavy and like
yes,
mental health related that's like
mhm,
sometimes I need to just take a step back and like
yes,
not put my mind in the mind of somebody who's dealing with this stuff when I'm also dealing with my own things.
yes, yeah. That's so valid and so true. And I think, yeah, I experience it too, and I think every writer who writes complex stories as us does experience this.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to say that my therapy is writing, and that is
Yeah.
good therapy. But like, like sometimes I maybe do need other therapy.
Yeah. No, it's such a slippery slope with like that because I feel that too. And I've talked about like my poetry as sort of like my diary in a way, and it helps me
Yes,
cope. But then
yes,
during other parts of my life, I realized that like sometimes when you're stuck on a thought, writing about it over and over again is like indulging yourself in the sadness. And instead of releasing it, you're just giving into it. And so
yes.
I remember there was a period of time not too long ago where I like literally on my phone put a time limit on my notes app because I was spending too much
Mm.
time writing poetry drafts in there. And I was like, I'm just making myself more sad. Like I need to stop indulging in like this
Mhm.
sad stuff over and over again and like pulling it and picking it apart in my head.
Yes. No, the indulging part is such a, and I think that's why I talked with a friend I'm like doing her she's kind of one like soft launching her creativity coaching program, and so she looked like for testers, and we've like touched on it because I've always like waited 2 years until like after I finished a novel to like publish it, and this poetry collection, like I'm still writing poetry about this cowboy. It's not like it's ended, but it's
Yeah.
like in a way I'm like really glad that I'm putting it something out now,
Yeah.
because then I don't have to indulge. Like here the main story is that I got stood up, and so that's usually that's usually the end of the poem,
Yeah.
always like, oh, you never called me, like,
Yeah.
hello. And so it's like I'm really proud that it kind of means that I'm letting go of this, like not indulging into, having
Yeah.
thoughts, like get it, having been stood up. God, English
Yeah.
is such a complicated.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not reminiscing anymore so much on like, oh, you never called me, like that's kind of over now because I'm publishing the poetry collection, which is Spoiler alert, it's just about that. No, just kidding. But no, I definitely get the indulgence where, and I mean, I guess that's why I decided to put out the poetry collection. Like, I never considered releasing my poetry. And then last year, I think it kind of hit a point where I was like, I need to let go. Like, I cannot just,
Yeah.
I cannot be still sad about you not calling me. Like,
Yeah.
something has to happen. And so, yeah.
Well, it helps to have like this physical thing to look at and be like,
Yes.
this is the product of my sadness. And also,
Yeah.
it like, yeah, I don't know, it just helps to look at it. And then it's like I said, it's like a scrapbook. Like, you get to look back
Yes.
at it, and then you get to be sad later too. Like, that's not a good
Yes.
thing, but it also is a good thing because it's like, I don't know, you can look at it more objectively when it's written
Yes.
down and
Exactly.
then learn more about yourself. And I feel like the faster you learn, the faster you can grieve and just kind of put it away.
Yeah. That's kind of I would like to transition here to a topic we said we would talk
Yeah.
about, our bisexuality.
Yeah.
um because when you were like, yeah, you put something down on the page and it revealed something from you, which I had like the most drastic
Yeah.
example of this happening. When I wrote It Was Here, the main character is Harrison Selleck, and so I'm writing a novel about a basically in the perspective of a man falling in love with a woman
Yeah.
called Annabelle. And very interesting. In the beginning of it, when I started writing this, I had a very dear close friend. She was kind of fresh. We kind of went to the same class, so the class was like new, we were new, and so we were like kind of sticking together. And we were like really good friends. And I started writing the novel, and I always repeatedly told her like, I have no idea why I'm writing this novel in perspective of a man, and like it pisses me off so much.
Yeah.
And with what happened was basically, during the writing process of writing the novel, she kind of left the school, so she kind of repeated the class, and so we were not in the same class anymore, and we kind of were not at the same school anymore. So she really kind of like just was disappeared from my life. And I remember being like, I got really depressed when that happened, because just of how like close we were and how much I thought of like how like nowadays I'm like thinking that maybe I just found it very close and like very
Yeah.
loving and like caring for each other. Um, but what happened is basically that the woman Harrison Selleck falls in love with really, like, she started wearing the clothes as my friends, and she listens to the same
Yeah.
music. She has like sentences she says, and so I've written that novel, finished it in May, and then in October, which is very, very Girl in Red themed
Yeah.
here. In October, I actually listened to Girl in Red, and Girl in Red has been like our favorite music, like my friends and I. Like, we always sat down together and listened to Girl in Red together. And I was sitting in the bus, it was raining, I remember it, and I listened to We Fell in Love in October. And it happened actually, we actually had met in October, like that's where our class had started in a way.
Yeah.
And so it was like 1 year after we kind of had started our friendship, and she was not anymore in my life, so I was like really feeling emotional. And
Yeah.
suddenly I was sitting in this bus, and it kind of hit me that I wrote a
Yeah.
man falling in love with a
Yeah.
woman, which looks like my best friend back then.
Yeah.
And so that's when I realized, like, I came home and I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I think I'm bisexual.
Yeah.
That's what I told her, because I was like, I think she was not only a friend to me. That's what I meant with, like, I think for me the friendship meant way more to me than to her.
Yeah.
I cannot speak for her. I've never talked to her ever again
Yeah.
since then. But yeah, that's where I realized, like, oh, maybe that's why I was like so sad and depressed that she was not
Yeah.
anymore going to the same class, because I actually, like, not liked her as a friend, but liked her maybe as, as
Yeah.
something I wanted to love. And so um that's the most drastic way of learning
Yeah.
something you've written down.
Yeah, no, it's so relatable being like also a bisexual writer. Is like I haven't experienced that as much in my fiction. Although I do have a funny story is when I was 14 and writing my very first novel. I have my main character is a 14-year-old girl and she starts dating like this 14-year-old guy in like the story. Like it's a YA, like it's just a basic love interest. And I always like had in my head when I was writing that book, I was like, oh, my main character is bisexual, but like nobody knows except for me because I'm the author and I'm like God or whatever. But looking back at it, and I was like, why would that need to be like a detail? Because I was like so like self-closeted at the time that
Yes.
like I didn't
Yeah.
realize that I was bisexual. So like having this projection of my character where like, oh, she's bisexual but she doesn't know it, is like, it was
Yes.
so like blaringly obvious looking back. And it's like, I don't know, like it is such a weird thing to look back on old writing and find like things you wrote
Yes.
at a time, because also being bisexual, like when I was younger, and like I think having female companionship is like so important for like
Mhm.
young teenage girls. But then like when you're bisexual, like you have this other layer of like
Yes.
confusion along with it. And so like I definitely think that that showed up in my writing when I was younger.
Yes. Yeah, it's not even like it's not a usual female companionship you
Yeah.
crave. It's like almost a longing.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
I experienced it. So with that friend, I always like longed for a deeper connection, and she kind of responded to it. And I remember she actually was already out. Like she was
Yeah.
out back then, was like, I'm bisexual. And everyone kind of kid around and was like, oh, you two are bisexual. And I was like, no way, I'm not, I'm straight.
Yeah. No, yeah,
No
I
way,
did
we're
this.
both
I would do the
flirting.
same thing when I was younger, where I had like this constant assurance to other people. I was like, XYZ, but I'm straight. And it's like,
Yes.
if you're truly straight, I feel like you usually don't have to clarify that much. Like, not
Exactly.
that much. Like, to the point where you're like always trying to convince people that like you're straight.
Yes. Yes. But it's like really interesting to reflect on that friendship.
Yeah.
And then also I remember I had like a other friend during that time, and they like constantly told me of like, you always giggle around her and you always tell her that
Yeah.
she's pretty. And, like, I
Yeah.
never got the clues. I never got the clues. Like um they are transgender, and so they had like a huge awareness of like,
Yeah.
right, like they kind of sensed it, but I did not. I was like, no, like no, like I was so
Yeah.
confused. I was like, what do you mean I don't flirt with her?
Yeah.
But as I said, we listened to Girl in Red, right? Like
It is funny, like when you're closeted and like people
yes.
around you are like, oh, you seem like you give off bisexual vibes. And it's like, no, definitely
Yeah.
not. And then like looking back, I was like, yes, absolutely. Like
Absolutely.
somehow other people saw it and like 15-year-old me did not see it at all.
Yeah, same. So, anyways, I really loved the moment though. I mean, it brought back an entire role of, like, I already grieved that friendship back
Yeah.
then, like hugely, like like the friendship breakup. And when I noticed that, I even crave, like, I opened up an entire
Yeah.
new world of like feelings, and so it's like interesting because I've had a moment the other night, where when I feel lonely, I
Yeah.
kind of really go into a spiral of like, what would have happened if, like, I would have known what kind of
Yeah.
feelings I had for her.
Yeah.
And so I witnessed myself writing a letter to her the other night. Like,
Yeah.
obviously I will never send it away, but like,
Yeah.
it's like interesting how she's like still apparently
Yeah.
present in my life.
It's almost
So
like when like things happen like that in your life, they become kind of like outside of the person themselves and more
yes.
like a story, or like this kind of
Yes.
this like mythological thing that like affected you on a deeper level that just
Yes.
kind
Yeah.
of haunts you, I guess.
Yes. Haunting is the good word to describe
Yeah.
it. It's like, yeah, it's like when I did the readings of It Was Here and I read out this one scene where Harrison describes very in detail of what she wears. Like, first of all, I don't know. I don't think a guy is out there
Yeah.
thinking exactly what a woman is wearing, but um, like every time I read this scene and it's like the exact same outfit like my friend always wore, it's like always like I always smile because I have like hair in my in my brain then, and it's like, oh, if everyone could just look into my, like, she haunts me, right? Like I will
Right.
forever read the scene and see the hair in front of me, and my
Yeah.
readers won't even maybe notice it, right?
Yeah.
So no, haunting is the right word. Same with same with poetry, right?
Yeah.
Like my poems about that cowboy
Yeah.
will haunt me forever, like not physically, but like those feelings you have for
Yeah.
this person will haunt me
Yeah.
forever.
That's a good way of
Which,
putting it, like the feelings haunt you. Because, like I said, it
yes,
kind of becomes like this own thing outside of the person itself.
yes, yes. Yeah. I always said that to like clarify that I just take inspiration from like specific people and for characters. But at the time the novel is finished, like the character has become its very own thing. Like it's
Yeah.
not even, you cannot even draw it back. I mean, maybe you can.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's the feelings that haunt you. Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that. No, yeah, I did experience. That's what. Yeah, thank you for like letting me share that. I
Yeah.
mean, it's my podcast, but like I wanted to
Yeah.
share that with you in the room.
Yeah, because
Because it
I
feels like
remember one time we were talking and we were like, I don't know how we got on the subject, but we were like, yeah, our poems are like so bisexual. And then we were like, wait, you too? And it was like this
yes,
weird, like,
yes,
I don't know, it
like
was like this weird moment where like we realized how much in common there was.
yeah. And since then, we've just
Yeah.
we collected a list of
Yeah.
similarities.
It's like because I remember we were like, oh my god, we have to talk about this whenever we do the podcast episode. Because we
Yes,
were like
yeah,
still trying to figure out when we were gonna do that, and so it's weird that it's
yeah.
finally here.
There you go. Just listen to this.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah.
Because especially if it was here, it's a pretty straight story, and I remember you said that on the other phone call. You were like, "It's so funny that I found out I'm bisexual." They've like
Yeah.
us, like they've
Yeah.
like through the man's eyes,
Yeah.
like. But no, I think for me personally, it's like important if someone like reads this novel and it's like because
Yeah.
it is like such a straight love story, but
Yeah.
actually,
And I feel like that makes
has
sense to me, like coming from a bisexual person. Like that makes sense that that's like how you would discover that.
yeah, yeah. Love that. That's my coming out story.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's like, yeah, as I said, readers should like read the novel and not like it's coming from a bisexual author. It's not coming
Yeah.
from a
Yeah.
it's not coming from a girl that just loves boys. Nope.
Yeah.
No, no, no. No, no, no. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to add anything else to like I remember you said I should ask you about like how your bisexuality like show like is represented in your poetry collection. You wear the graveyard, which by the way, can we just quickly talk about the title? I
Yeah.
love the title You Wear the
Thank you.
Graveyard. How did you first of all, I love the almost like audacity of being like you were the
Mm.
grave. Yeah, like
Yeah.
calling someone the graveyard is like wow. Like you
Yeah.
immediately think of like wow, I like how much did they hurt her? Like what's going on?
I think it was like there was one specific poem, and it's the poem that like enters the collection, which is weird because it was one of the last poems that I wrote for the collection. But I still like to this day feel like I derive so much of my style from this poem. It's called
Mm,
Hysterics. And there's a few different lines in this that mention like graveyards. It's like a graveyard filled with bodies, and then later on it says, as if the
mm,
graveyard was you, as if, yeah, there's like, and then there's a few other parts in the story where it mentions like, you were in the graveyard, or like you were the graveyard. And I don't know, I just like, it's so hard for me to find titles. Like that's something
yes.
that's really difficult for me because I always want like a longer title that's more unique. But I
Yes.
remember I read that line and I was like, this poetry collection is like overall kind of sad, right? Like it kind of like there's a lot of narratives going on, but like if you read it without knowing the history behind it, you'd just be like, oh yeah, this is somebody writing about like something happening, right? Like, and I
Yeah.
feel like that just like summed it up as I don't know how to explain it. I just wanted it to be blunt, and I wanted it to be
Yes.
like have that grotesque image of like a graveyard. And like
Yes.
that's where the flowers come in too, is I have this one poem where I mention like giving flowers away as like a gift versus like putting flowers on a gravestone is like kind of the parallel of that. And that's why I also wanted flowers on the cover of it.
Yes.
Is yeah, I don't know. I think I just use like dying and flowers as a metaphor a lot. So I think it only made sense. And I just like the
Yes.
way it flowed too.
I love it. I'm obsessed with it. It's like I carried it. I think I carried it once through London. I like
Yeah.
forgot to pack it into my backpack and already had it on. And I was laying on the table and I was like, oh, you know what? I was just walking with this book, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like really. I felt like really cool walking with a
Mm-hmm.
book called "You Were the Graveyard." Like, you know, when you're like sitting in the cheap or like public transport, and
Yeah.
somebody's like, you want to know what they're reading, and then you read like
Yeah.
graveyard, and it's like,
That's so
oh,
cool.
yeah. So yeah, do you want to dive into like how your bisexuality kind of
Yeah.
shows up
I feel like I
in there?
don't have like a super great answer just because I feel like it's so blunt. Is because I wrote all of the poems in the collection mostly between the ages of 14 and 16, and then with like a few of them being when I was like 17, or like 17 finding old drafts and like rewriting them. Um I feel like it was just like I wrote about like a close female friendship I had where like
Yes.
obviously this was when I was out, but I was still like kind of, it wasn't as easy to like tell when
Yes.
you're like in a close female relationship. And I hear a lot of like queer women talking about this. Is like
Yeah.
you become so like close to another girl like in a friendship way that like it's hard to recognize like if you had feelings. And so
Yeah.
like I think looking back I wrote about that a lot, especially there's a few when I was like 15 where I was like writing about like this quote unquote friendship, and I was like looking back I was like I definitely had feelings for her. And it's like I don't know, it's like I was mostly nervous to publish those poems just because
Mm.
like I'm not out to like everybody in my family. So I was like trying to figure out how obvious it is that it's written about like a woman, and I'm like it's pretty obvious. Like I have one poem titled Rosie, which is like at the time I was
Oh
writing
yeah.
it, I was more like this is fictional. This is like based off of like a prompt that I was working on, and it is, but like at the time I also like kind of had a crush on a girl. So it's like it does show through in the sense of like the
Yes.
pronouns and stuff. But
Yes.
it's also funny going from like reading each poem and being like, oh, this one is like a boy, this one is a girl, or this is the perspective from a boy or a girl, or like because like you said
Yes.
too, writing from the perspective of a man about a woman because you don't acknowledge that you're a woman who likes women. So it's like
Yes.
I feel like you can also see that. And I had poems where I was like I'm writing this about a girl because I'm the narrator's a man, because there was like no self-awareness there
Absolutely.
whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I love that. Yeah. I remember Rosie.
Yeah.
I even think I annotated something. Wait, let me see. Wait, is it no, there we go. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I love that. I have underlined that everything always seems to hold together, Rosie, until nothing can be found.
Yeah.
Because I was like, damn.
That was like a line that I really liked too. That and like the ending being I
Mm,
love you and good night, is that's like the ending. Is because I have
yes,
another this was a huge thing I was proud of in this collection, is I have another poem titled Good Night. And it writes
yes,
about like how good morning is usually like a greeting and good night is always like a goodbye. So like
yes,
to have the ending of that poem be I love you and good night is like saying goodbye, and then like
yes,
not having the context of that like provided until later on is like something that I really
yes.
liked about that parallel.
I love that. Yeah. Good night is always a weird. Yeah. it's what I'm thinking. Like the older I get, it's kind of
Yeah.
like as a kid, you just say goodnight, but like
Yeah.
I don't know, it makes a bit of like I don't know. And when you like experience death in your family
Yeah.
wise, it's like really like goodnight gets a weird
Yeah.
undertone. No, I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Let me think. Oh, I was just thinking. Can I share how I came up with the title "Pretty Tennessee"?
Yeah, of course. I was like, I remember, for context to people like listening, I like remember you'd sent me a poem, right, that had mentioned Tennessee, and then like you
That was
told
the very
me,
first one.
yeah, and then
Yes.
you had, I think, told me a story from like your real life, and like you hadn't even told me how you got the title, but I was like, wait a second, and I kind of had this moment where I like found you out and I like asked, and you were like,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a story I don't tell publicly.
Yeah.
But I love that moment. Yeah, I told you a real life experience, and then later on I told you that the poetry collection is called Pretty Tennessee, and you were like,
Yeah.
"Wait, is that linked to that?"
Yeah,
Like,
I was like, I had like an aha moment, and I'm not gonna like
yes,
share your
same.
story because I know it's personal, but it is funny that I saw that
Yes.
before you told me.
Okay. But to the listener, or to like everyone reading the poetry collection, I have a good story for you too. And that is it's actually true, because the very first poem I sent you was Tennessee, Your Treehouse, a
Hmm.
Dog and Your Mama. And I remember writing back then this poem, and I've been like, why Tennessee? Like I was so
Yeah.
confused why Tennessee, and then obviously the word is actually pretty if you think about it, because it has
Hmm.
like double letters, right? There's a lot of double
Yeah.
letters. And then when I tried, then that real life story happened, and I was like, oh, this is actually scary. Like the connection is actually very scary.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I need to come up with a story. And then I actually found out, because so I wrote that Tennessee poem, and then way later on I wrote in another poem, I wrote like Pretty Tennessee. And I did not even question anymore why Tennessee. Like I was like, all right, it's just Tennessee. I just chose it as a
Yeah.
place, as a symbol, maybe, I don't know. And when digging through the archive and like coming up with a story, I actually found the real story of why I wrote Tennessee in that very first poem. And actually wrote it down because I listened to Phoebe Bridgers' Graceland too,
Hmm.
and Graceland is in Memphis, which is in Tennessee. And I was
Interesting.
like, wow, this makes like I did not like I was thinking like, why did I came up with Tennessee? And I was like, I came up because of Phoebe Bridgers, because I listened to Phoebe Bridgers. And then if you actually, as I said, the fictional novel to it has this I am German, right? I'm from Germany,
Right.
and there's this I got obsessed when I was a child. Like I'm still obsessed with these stories of like Germans don't write them anymore. But in the 80s we had like huge, obviously, when like after the World War our country got like split into different parts, and so there were a lot of American soldiers in Germany who then married Germans. Or Elvis Presley had been in Germany and met
Hmm.
his Priscilla in Germany. Like she's not German, but she was here for her father. I think he was working here too, and so that's really kind of the story I'm like picking up. This like American man,
Yeah.
this
Interesting.
American cowboy in my case is like fighting this German girl. And in the fictional novel I like go in depth also about like the two different cultures,
Yeah.
like different wise, like usually like mostly music wise, but like obviously music got inspired by history. So like the German, like the American cowboy is like a bit of like talking about country music, and it's like very influenced by country music. And then there's the German music journalist. Not the differentiating here, but yeah, the German music journalist is like actually like influenced by Kraftwerk, or like German musicians who like were like during West Germany were like really present, or like it also like influence like right the English like synth pop, like Depeche Mode was hugely inspired by like Kraftwerk, and so how did it come up? Yeah, so I really loved also like picking up this idea of like Elvis and Priscilla, you know, the story of an American and Germany. So when I then decided to call the poetry collection Pretty Tennessee, I was like, yeah, Tennessee is more of a symbol of like this American German love story that it kind of, you know, we especially saw of like Elvis coming out last year by the cinemas. So yeah, that's why I was like, I'm sticking to Tennessee. I love Elvis. Everyone should love Elvis. So
just coming on here quickly to say that we face technical issues at this point of our episode. So I think we lost about 9 minutes of our actual conversation. And just saying it because here's now a gap between talking about my poetry collection, Pretty Tennessee, which by the way is out now, to what's to come, in which we talk about Eliza's now new released novel, Devil and a Half. Enjoy.
I think I was just saying, I don't know, just like upcoming projects. I have a novel coming out hopefully late this year, maybe early next year. Thriller novel. Also working on another novel that is hopefully my best work so far. I definitely feel like it is. I definitely had a moment when I was writing one scene where I scared myself and I had trouble sleeping because it was like so kind of dark, but I'm also, and this is a little bit further out, but I've talked to my publisher a little bit about doing another poetry collection, maybe releasing sometime next year. But yeah, it's gonna be busy. I'm gonna be graduating end of next year, so I'm also doing a internship at a magazine at my school next semester. So I'm applying to my portfolio in school, and there's going to be a lot going on. I'm going to be busy, but I'm really excited because this is the first time where I have like projects about to come out, as well as projects I'm working on, as well as projects that have already come out, as well as projects that I'm like trying to talk to my publisher about, and it's like I have everything at different stages, and it's overwhelming but also mostly exciting.
Nice. Yeah, I have it at the moment. I'm very overwhelmed at the moment too because I've like, you know, It Was Here has kind of its release time right now because I'm financially able to like buy the copies and everything, and then at the same time I have to finish my poetry collection because pre-order date is going to be my birthday. But I also have a birthday party, so I'm kind of like organizing all of the things and like finishing, you know, formatting the poetry collection and like trying to I'm backpacking, so I want to take one copy with me, um to like maybe revise some poems, you know, be like, oh, maybe I don't want this to get published. But yeah, so I'm like all over the place right now too. And actually what I call myself doing is I started writing a short story collection. Because I'm like, apparently my brain cannot handle poetry or novel writing at the moment, just because like, you know, I have this release thing happening if It Was Here, and then the poetry collection is coming out, so I witness how my brain like wants to keep everything simple, and so yeah, I'm working on
there's
a
a
short
lot
story
going
collection.
on. It's really exciting, but I feel like both of us are at like the same stages of our career, kind of, with like the different forms of content. We have books that have been out, books that just came out, books that are coming out. Like there's so much, but it's so fun and it's so cool.
Yeah, I love that. I'm excited for us, and we have each other, so we can like have a good friendship.
And it's
so
been great having you since like back in the days where it was like neither of us really had like that much going on, but we were like trying to work on stuff, and now this is like the after effect of like all that work that we were putting in.
Yeah, right, of the desire of wanting to be busy. Now we are busy.
Yeah, definitely grateful. A little overwhelmed, but mostly grateful.
Yes. And to wrap everything up, I wanted to ask you one question of the bonus
Okay.
legends check, which I ask everyone. And that one
Mm-hmm.
is, who is your legend?
Who is my legend?
Yes.
That's difficult. Am I allowed to say somebody that I know?
Yeah.
Okay, I would have to say it's my mom because she from day one has read all my stories, read all my novels, and she's a fast reader. She is
Yes.
the biggest reader that I know in my life. She can read my pages and be like, this is how it is in books, and this is how it is in your genre, and like all this stuff. And
Mm.
she's such a good editor. She's such a good beta reader. So I'm definitely going to say my mom because she's been there since day one. I remember she read Devil and a Half so fast. And she like marked up all the pages and gave me such great feedback. And whenever I have writing, I'm just like, read this. And like, she'll read it in like 2 days and come back with feedback. So I'm definitely going to say that my legend is my mom.
Love that. I have a lot of people who say that moms. I guess moms are just really
Yeah.
important in
Yeah.
life. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Howdy, enjoyed listening to this episode. You know the gist, you know what to do. Make sure to subscribe and share this episode with all of your friends and leave a review so more people can tune in to my conversations with my legends. This podcast episode is hosted, edited, and produced by Bonnie Orbison. Support her continuous work on her paid Substack, which is like an online diary, and she shares her poetry and lyrical essays on there, or get one of her books. Right now she has 2 fictional novels in German and English out, and now as well a poetry collection called Pretty Tennessee. This podcast is managed by the Queer Lounge, and the theme song is by Evie Solis. Video clips of this episode and anthems of the day on our Instagram at Bonnie's Legends, and we're also sharing from Monday to Friday daily the new music releases, so make sure to check that out. This episode is sponsored by Zencaster. Use my special link in the show notes to save 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. See you next time.